Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual education program at Cancer Support Community South Bay. I'm Rebecca, the program manager, and I welcome you to this workshop titled Sip and Savor, Tea's Health Benefits. Before we begin, if this is your first time joining us, CSC South Bay's mission is to uplift and strengthen people impacted by cancer by providing support, fostering compassionate communities, and breaking down barriers to care. Our vision is that everyone impacted by cancer receives the support they want and need throughout their experience. We serve the South Bay, Long Beach, and Orange County area all at no cost. Our program includes support groups, networking groups, healthy lifestyle classes, social activities, and educational programs like this workshop. Educational programs are open to all. If you'd like to hear more about our services or join our community, please visit our website at cscsouthbay.org. Before I introduce today's speaker, we ask you to keep your microphone muted to eliminate any distracting background noise. Please feel free to enter any general questions into the chat function found at the bottom of the Zoom window, and we'll answer them after Meghan's presentation. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our workshop speaker. Meghan Laszlo is originally from Atlanta, Georgia, where she completed her undergraduate and graduate education in nutrition. She is a certified specialist in oncology nutrition and has worked directly with individuals undergoing cancer treatment for the past 14 years at Cedars-Sinai. Meghan teaches cooking classes and leads a nutrition lecture series as part of Cedars-Sinai Cancer's Wellness, Resilience, and Survivorship program. Thank you so much, Meghan, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's a pleasure to be back with you all. I appreciate the hybrid format to see some individuals in person, and thank you for everyone that's joining online. We'll go ahead and get started. So today I really wanted to focus on tea and the health benefits of tea, and so we'll go from here. Let's see. Okay, perfect. So what I think is really interesting about tea and something that we'll continue to talk about is teas mostly come from the same plant, Camellia sinensis. And so all of our teas come from this same plant, but they've gone through different processing to either be black tea or green tea. And then there's also Indian tea as well. And the characteristics really do vary a lot depending on where the tea is grown, the weather, the harvesting, and the different processing methods. And so that's how we can turn this one tea type or this one tea leaf into many different types of tea. So we have our white tea, which is just very mellow, kind of floral, just really minimally fermented, less oxidation. So the more tea is oxidized, kind of the darker, the more robust the flavor. So black tea has gone through more oxidation than something like green tea or white tea. Then we have our green tea, which depending on where it's from, kind of a mild, mellow taste, or maybe more savory or oceanic in flavor. And then we have matcha tea, which is more vegetal, kind of tastes like, some say it tastes like grass. It could also be nutty or bitter or have other flavor variations too, also depending on what it's combined with. And then we have oolong, which is like a light to full body, floral, grassy, sweet, maybe even toasty, which is also partially fermented. And then we have our black tea, which is very strong, very robust, kind of bitter. And that's gone through more fermentation, more oxidation. So all of these teas have gone through a fermentation process. When we talk about fermented foods, we tend to think about things like yogurt or kimchi or kefir. But other foods have gone through a fermentation process, but they may not have live active bacteria like those other fermented foods do. So things like vinegar has gone through a fermentation process, tea, wine, other foods. And so you can see here, this really breaks down the preparation levels in these different teas. So white tea, as you can see, has been steamed and dried. Our green tea has been steamed or roasted, rolled or shaped, and then dried. And then we have our oolong tea, which has gone through a partial fermentation, some enzymatic oxidation, which really kind of gives it some of those different flavors, those toasty, malty flavors that it can have. And then you can see also the black tea has gone through many different steps of processing as well, including distortion, maceration, then it's been fermented, all giving it more oxidation, more robust flavor. And matcha is very popular. I'm sure you're all familiar with matcha. And the interesting thing about it is it's whole tea leaves. So it's whole tea leaves that's not brewed. These tea leaves are ground up into a powder and then they're put into a suspension. They don't really dissolve into the liquid. That's the reason we use this bamboo whisk with so many different prongs, is because you're whisking that powdered tea leaf, into a frothy suspension. And so it will, for a little while, until it will start to fall, essentially. And so that's one of the things that gives matcha some of its other qualities, is that you're consuming the whole leaf rather than something that's been brewed and soaked in water. Then I wanted to touch a little bit on our infused and scented teas. You may be familiar with jasmine, Earl Grey, chai, or like a tropical green tea. These get their flavors from the tea leaves being placed with something like jasmine flowers. And so that infuses that jasmine flavor in jasmine tea. Otherwise, you could use something like jasmine oils, and those are applied to the tea leaves to give it that jasmine flavor. And then we have our tea blends, which could include many different types of teas within the same product, like English breakfast, for example. That is a blend of 3 different black teas. So that all creates flavor variations. And it's also visually appealing to see, flower petals in your tea as well, right? Or little bits of dried fruit. And so when we think about the phytonutrients in tea, so when you think about like the health benefits and like why do we care, what's the benefit of this beverage that's so commonly consumed throughout the world? And it really comes down to its phytonutrients. Tea is not a good source of vitamins, minerals, protein, calories, or anything else, right? It's really a form of phytonutrients. And so phytonutrients are sometimes called phytochemicals. And these are a component, a bioactive component that come from a food that's not a vitamin, it's not a mineral, but it has a health benefit for our body. And so there's different classifications of these. One is flavonoids, and then you can see all the different types of flavonoids underneath that umbrella. And today we're going to focus mainly on the flavin-3-ols, which is a category of flavonoids. We may just call them flavonoids for simplicity. If we want to get really specific about it, this is the reason why we care about tea. It's because this particular flavonoid, flavin-3-ols. And with that umbrella, there are more to take a look at when we start getting into it. So there's our catechins, there's gallocatechin, there's EGCG, or epogallocatechin 3 gallate, which is the component that's most studied in green tea specifically. So green tea is the best source of EGCG, but then we have our other flavonol types throughout teas in general. So we're really looking at our flavin-3-ols when we talk about tea. So without getting too into it. So flavonoid is a type of antioxidant. Yeah. It can, yes, we're getting there. It has anti-inflammatory properties, anti-mutagenic properties, which means it can protect from DNA changes from exposure to things in our environment. So it seems to be cancer protective. It can be anti-carcinogenic. In different ways. It may help cancer from starting. It may help cancer prevent from spreading. Again, this is getting very micro in terms of our understanding of it. It is difficult to pinpoint how something that we consume will interact within our body, but these are some of the things that it's been studied for and known for. And there are other sources besides tea. Flavonoids or flavin-3-ols specifically are found in apples, pears, berries, cocoa, and red wine. And the reason why we're talking about this a bit more and highlighting it is because the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, they're our lead nutrition organization in the United States. They created a guideline for flavonoid, for this flavin-3-ol specifically. And there are no other guidelines for bioactive nutrients. There's guidelines for how much vitamin C we need, and A, and zinc, and all of our other essential nutrients. But there are no guidelines except for this one for nutrients that are considered non-essential. And most of our guidelines are based on whether or not, we get a deficiency from not consuming enough of something. This is something we want to focus on consuming more of because it's been documented to have a health benefit. So this goes beyond deficiency concerns. There's no identified nutrient deficiency if you don't get enough flavin-3-ols. This is all about promoting health from a guideline, which is kind of a good direction to be going in instead of focusing just on what's essential to keep us from getting deficiency. It's better, I think, at this point, in the research to say what is optimal, what will promote health and go beyond what's just essential. And the guideline is high, and we'll talk about a little bit about what these levels mean, but the recommendation is for 400 to 600 milligrams daily of flavin-3-ols. And this is because they've been found to reduce risk of cardiovascular disease and diabetes. They've been found to reduce blood pressure, improve cholesterol, and blood sugar control. Specifically, they've been found to lower LDLs and raise HDLs. They don't seem to have an effect on total cholesterol, though. They've also been found to lower hemoglobin A1C, which is a diagnostic marker for diabetes. And so this is a food-based guideline. This is not a recommendation to take flavin-3-ol dietary supplements from the health food store or wherever you buy supplements. This is really a focus on food, and they're not saying to go out and buy antioxidant supplements that have flavin-3-ols in it. They're very, very specific about that. Let's talk a little bit about some of the background in this. And so this highlights, this is NHANES data. This highlights consumption of flavin-3-ols in the United States. And you can see how it's broken down. So you get age 20 and over, consume about 164 flavin-3-ols per day, or a total flavonoid intake of 213. Females 20 and over, 175, males and females combined around 170. And we're looking at this, but the recommendations for 400 to 600 per day. So we're nowhere near getting that amount regularly in the diet. And this analysis was done back in 2023, but I doubt that it's suddenly increased in that time, right? And so when I think about how to achieve this amount, this 400 to 600 milligrams per day, you can see these different teas and the variations in how they're prepared and the average flavin-3-ols that they provide. You can take a photo, we can email the slides later. So you can see that these freshly brewed teas like black tea or white tea have pretty high amounts. Same thing with the green tea. But you can see some variations here when the green tea and black tea are decaffeinated, they have less. So decaffeination or the decaffeination process often yields to less flavonoids, less antioxidants in the tea. You see your green tea, again, this is flavin-3-ol specific, not EGCG specific. So we're really focusing on that. And then our oolong has less. And then our ready-to-drink teas, like if you buy an Arizona green tea at the store, that has considerably less flavonoids than if you brewed a green tea at home. Or like you could also take that and think if you made iced tea to keep in your refrigerator and drank it a week later, it's probably going to have less flavonoid content because the storage time does seem to affect the content of the tea. So freshly brewed is better in this context. It'd be also interesting to look at things like Starbucks or other coffee shops and tea shops that prepare things in advance and how that affects the flavonoid content as well. And then we'll look at our other sources. So you can see these other foods that contain flavin-3-ols and the amount of food and then how many milligrams of flavin-3-ols they yield. Again, keeping in mind we're aiming for 400 to 600. You can see some of these other foods are considerably lower. And so it starts to become obvious that you can't achieve this amount without drinking tea. Because these other, how many blackberries can you eat? You're never going to eat enough to get that amount from food sources. And these are our highest food sources. So even looking at this chart here, the highest is blackberries. Half a cup gives 31 milligrams, right? So let's put this into kind of practical terms. And so if you wanted to see a meal plan showing what it would take to get this recommended amount, this is what this looks like. So we have our breakfast. It can include other things. We're just focusing on the foods that would yield flavin-3-ols. So maybe you had eggs or other things in this, but we're not going to focus on that. Maybe you had a black tea, an apple, later in the day some decaffeinated green tea because it's later in the day, and then a snack with some dark chocolate. You could get 500 milligrams of these flavin-3-ols. But it really comes down to having these 2 cups of tea integrated into the daily intake, into the daily diet to achieve this amount. Because again, the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics didn't want anyone taking antioxidant supplements to achieve this. So again, this really highlights this recommendation. It's not related to cancer prevention. This is solely based on lowering cholesterol, lowering A1C, so cardiometabolic protection from consuming tea. But let's shift to cancer prevention. Oh, did you want to take a picture? Okay. And so I get asked a lot about tea because there's a lot of interest in tea and whether or not it plays a role in cancer prevention. We know that tea polyphenols do have cancer preventative effects, but there's still limited evidence that it prevents cancer, or could prevent cancer recurrence, right? And so I wanted to highlight a little bit of some of our consensus guidelines. So this comes from the World Cancer Research Fund. They often partner an Institute for Cancer Research and put together guidelines for many different cancer types. So say like a gastric cancer, for example, or stomach cancer. What are the foods that increase risk or decrease risk? And they put together these summary statements about this specifically. So summarize years and years of research on this. And they have found that there's limited but suggestive evidence for reduced risk of bladder cancer, but not other types with tea. And then there is also a really good umbrella review and meta-analysis, which is one of our highest levels of research. And it was an observational study, so it wasn't an intervention, but they found there's an association of lower risk of multiple cancer types with tea consumption, and that there's convincing evidence that consuming tea reduces risk of oral cancers, which is interesting. But again, there's not conclusive evidence that if you drink tea, it will reduce your risk of cancer, but there's an association there, which is really what a lot of our data is when it comes to nutrition and cancer risk reduction. So I still think there's a positive benefit to consuming tea, even with this data, because it's inherently difficult to study the effects of our food choices over time when there's so many confounding variables and differences in how we may consume something as well. And so we can talk about this too. So this is tea and cancer risk. So does tea increase risk of any cancers? Right? And so the International Agency for Research on Cancer, they're an organization that labels food a carcinogen or a probable carcinogen. They found that very hot beverages at greater than 149 degrees Fahrenheit are classified as probable carcinogens. For reference, water boils at like 210 degrees Fahrenheit. So hot, hot, but maybe not as hot as you think. It could be worth checking in. And part of that is because we know that the tea would burn the lining of the esophagus, burn the mouth. And so that association is really with oral and esophageal cancer types. And then the World Cancer Research Fund, again, that organization, they found that hot tea may increase risk of esophageal cancer. And they did a big study. It was in Iran, and they were looking at this specifically, but they weren't able to really take away all the other variables. This population that they looked at, there was high alcohol use, tobacco use, pollution, and other confounding variables. But again, this really goes back to the probability of having very hot beverages and then burning your throat and mouth when you consume them, and that seems to be a risk for oral and throat cancers. And so how should tea be prepared? Besides keeping it below our 100, let's just say 150 degrees Fahrenheit. I don't know if anyone has a mug that tells the temperature, but it could be worth checking if you have an thermometer or just like a cooking thermometer, just see how hot is your tea when you like it. I hear sometimes folks ordering beverages from a coffee shop extra hot. And I think like, oh, okay, how hot is that?
Soup.
Yes, or soup, or yes, or other very hot things. Yeah. Yeah, if it's burning you, if it's blistering your mouth, it's too hot. That causes cellular damage. Yeah.
It's not too hot.
Has to be just right. And so tea preparation, what is ideal besides temperature? And there are there are tea masters, tea enthusiasts that will tell you certain leaves need to be a certain temperature for a certain duration. We're not going to get into all of those nuances. But in general, to get the maximum amount of flavonoids, you want your tea to be brewed for about 3 to 5 minutes. So it has time to sit
I leave my tea
and
in
fully
place.
steep.
I just leave the tea bag in there
Yeah,
for hours, is that okay?
it's okay. I don't know if there's an extra benefit. It will get more bitter, more concentrated. And some folks like to add more water to their tea and reuse the tea bag. That's going to be weaker the second time around, but it's okay to do that. Oh, sure. The question was, I like to leave my tea bag in my cup of tea for hours. Is that okay? Yeah. So it's okay, but the 3 to 5 minutes seems to be ideal for maximum flavonoid content. And then, often flavor. There are some concerns about milk and whether or not it reduces the bioavailability, like our body's ability to absorb these just flavonoids, one of them being EGCG from tea. Studies have shown that adding milk, whether it's soy milk or cow's milk, those proteins seem to bind about 30% of the catechins or the EGCG, in the tea. So it does reduce it somewhat, but it doesn't completely make it inert. Like we're still going to get a health benefit from it. And I think it really comes down to how do you like your tea? If the only way you're going to drink tea is by adding milk in it, then I think it's okay to use it. If you've consistently tried tea without milk and you just won't drink it, I'd say add the milk and get the benefit of consuming the tea.
It's the tea leaves. Can you define?
Yes, so we're talking, the question was, can you define tea leaves? We're brewing tea. So if we have a bag of green tea or we have some loose black tea and we're putting that into a tea infuser, those formats of brewing tea leaves.
But not a tea bag. Tea bag would be less potent.
No, they're the same.
Okay.
They're the same. We'll talk about tea bags in a second though. And then lemon, studies have found that adding lemon to your tea may increase these flavonoids or bioavailability of these flavonoids. So if you have iced tea and you squeeze some lemon into it, that may make it more bioavailable to your body. You're also adding vitamin C. Yeah, not a bad thing.
Substitute milk there, it's kind of derived from seed vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
It comes in different flavors. She has a nice flavor to it.
So the question was about whether or not adding a plant-based layers creamer would affect the bioavailability of EGCG or other flavonoids. I haven't seen a study on that specifically, so well, as to the flavor, but bioavailability, I'm unsure. This study specifically cited that it was the protein content of the milk that was binding the flavonoids, but we'd have to actually study it to say whether or not it does. And then added sugars. So this is a big one when it comes to tea and tea preparations, especially when we think about our different tea purveyors in the community and the concoctions that they serve and the different flavoring agents that they add to it, like syrups. And so this is something to limit. We do want to limit added sugars. Our standard recommendation is that less than 10% of our calories should come from added sugars each day. So for most folks on a 2,000 calorie diet, that means less than 50 grams of added sugar or less than 12 teaspoons per day, which I think is actually kind of a lot. There was some lobbying to reduce that recommendation to less than 5% of calories, but it was not adopted into the final guidelines. But added sugars are something we want to limit. So there's no nutritional benefit to consuming added sugar. We know that consuming too much added sugar is associated with increased body fat, and that is a risk factor for many different cancer types. So this is something we want to limit. I don't think we need to avoid it entirely, but it's definitely something worth paying attention to. I do favor sugars that yield calories, so cane sugar, maple syrup, honey, as opposed to artificial sweeteners. There's some artificial sweeteners and how they affect our gut microbiome. and how they may affect diabetes risk and other considerations too. So my personal professional opinion is to consume the regular natural sugars, but in very small amounts. Stevia is considered like an alternative sweetener, and the World Health Organization made a recommendation to avoid artificial and alternative sweeteners a few years ago because in part due to the detrimental effects on GI health, stevia included in their analysis.
What's the difference between artificial and an alternative?
So there's these are nuances. So what's the difference between an artificial and an alternative sweetener? So artificial sweeteners would be something that are created. So things like sucralose, right? That's added to many like protein drinks or things like that. Whereas stevia is considered like a natural sweetener, comes from a leaf, but it's an so it doesn't yield very many calories, but it's still associated with these negative effects when consumed in the way that it's being consumed. Adding it to things like yogi tea, for example, or other foods. Yeah. So these definitions can be kind of nuanced. It depends on the sweetening agent. We can talk about that another time in more detail though. And then tea is also best consumed in between meals. Tea can bind iron in the body. And so it's something we want to consume if we're concerned about intake or have low iron lab values, working on trying to increase it through food choices, or you're getting iron infusions or things like that, you do want to separate the tea from the food because it can be iron binding. So caffeine, our next most common question about tea. So this outlines the caffeine content in different beverages and food products. I think chocolate's on here. So you can see that there's some variation. Tea, definitely has less caffeine than coffee. We know that. And then matcha even has less than green tea. Depends on how concentrated your matcha drink is, though. Some folks use half a teaspoon per 8 ounces of liquid. Others use a full teaspoon. They like it concentrated. So that affects it as well. And then decaf coffee, for example, still has some caffeine in it. Chocolate has a little bit, and then our decaf black tea still has a very minor amount of caffeine. But all that said, up to 400 milligrams per day is not associated with increased risk of any chronic diseases. But caffeine affects us all differently. So if it keeps you up at night, it makes you feel jittery, hurts your stomach, those are all things to consider when choosing caffeinated or non-caffeinated. So I'll just pull all this up.
Even when I have decaf, my stomach still gets upset.
Are you adding? So the question was, even when I have decaf, my stomach still gets upset. So, that may be resolved with a little bit of milk added to it to kind of soften some of the bitterness. If not, we can talk after and maybe troubleshoot a little bit. Yeah. And so there's different ways to decaffeinate tea. Again, we're getting very nuanced. One is ethyl acetate. And so basically the tea leaves are soaked into a solution and the ethyl acetate binds to the caffeine and then the tea leaves are dried again and now they're decaffeinated. Another one is carbon dioxide. And then, so I guess I should break this down a little bit. So our ethyl acetate method may reduce catechins. These are one of our flavonoids in tea. And so that's the concern with ethyl acetate. It's like, yes, it works, but it can reduce catechins. Carbon dioxide method may retain catechins. So that's a good alternative method. And then water extraction really reduces the flavor. They basically pre-brew the tea, and so that reduces the flavor of the tea, but it does decaffeinate it. And so what I've included on this slide is the different tea purveyors, if you will, or manufacturers of tea and the different processes they use. However, you'll see that some of these are repeated, like Harney and Sons. So it really just depends on which tea. So you can go to their website and look at it and kind of decide whether or not you want to consume that tea or not. If you're regularly consuming decaffeinated tea and you're just trying to find your product, this could be something to take a look at. And so brand recommendations, just pull this all up. So this is This is directly from consumer lab reports. They act as a third-party organization to evaluate the content and quality of different products and whether or not they contain heavy metals like lead or arsenic or have other concerns with. And so do a report on something like tea. While they can't include every single brand out there, these are the ones that they've approved. So you can, and then they have a top pick. So these top picks that are highlighted in dark green are the ones with the highest amounts of EGCG, so one of our flavonoids. So Trader Joe's organic green tea, Lipton green tea had the highest flavonoid content compared to even some of the more expensive teas like Numi, right? So it's just information, something to think about when choosing a product. And then we have our decaffeinated green tea, the Yogi Pure Tea, green decaf retained a good amount of EGCG. They probably use the carbon dioxide method to decaffeinate it. And then we have our matcha teas. Again, they didn't test every matcha out there, but these are the ones that they tested that met their standards. And then we have our bottled green tea. And so this one actually had a high EGCG content compared to Arizona green tea, which they did not recommend. Because it has the EGCG content was so low. They're like, what's the point? It doesn't have the antioxidants in it. Why would you drink this? It usually has a lot of added sugar too. So. And then in terms of the tea brewing method, there's multiple ways you could use it or like a French press like this to brew tea. There's also tea bags. And so when we think about our tea bags, even though some of our like quote unquote fancy teas may look really nice, they may have flowers in them, they may be very presentable. They often do use nylon bags, and these have plastics in them. And there's studies that show that when you brew tea, I'm ruining someone's day right now, that when you brew tea, those plastics do enter the tea itself, those microplastics from the nylon tea bags. And a lot of the companies, especially with our California composting law, are now making our tea bags compostable. So that is something that you can look at on something like this. This is it says compostable tea bags, and so that you know that it's paper, not plastic, because you can't compost plastic, right? They've also taken that next step to remove the staple out of the tea bag that was historically there as well. And then, yeah, you can look for other things like whether or not it's recyclable, but this will really, if it's compostable or not, that'll tell you that it's a paper tea bag. And then we have our loose leaf tea. You can use an infuser, a steeping ball, a strainer, or other methods to brew your tea. And then some caution and consideration. We do want to limit our tea. I'm just going to go ahead and pour this out. We do want to limit our tea to about 5 cups per day. There's not a health benefit to consuming more than that. And with 6 cups or more per day, there is a concern that it can increase or it kind of artificially raise different biomarkers. And so this is a big concern for a lot of our patients, that consuming more could increase specifically CA19-9 and CA125. As well. And then, as I mentioned earlier, tea may reduce iron absorption. I'm just going to get these going for us. And then there's medication interactions as well. As there is with just about everything, is something to consider. And also one of the reasons why we're focusing mainly on just this one tea type today and not getting into the herbal teas, because there are some concerns for medication interactions. And that's always something to check with your provider about, especially for something that if you're consuming it regularly. If there's any, foods or supplements or other things that you should avoid with your medication, that's a good conversation to have with your doctor or your dietitian as well. They can help you navigate that, or the pharmacist. It's good to have those conversations. And so there are some medication interactions here. And so it's something to take a look at. It's something we're still learning more about, particularly, and we didn't really get into this, but green tea extract. And green tea extract is something to limit attention to the EGCG amounts. I believe it's about 330 milligrams of EGCG appears to be safe, but amounts higher than that has been shown to be damaging to the liver. So you really have to, especially green tea extract is a dietary supplement. So again, that's something you'd want to check, make sure that it's safe to use, and if there's any other concerns with it. Mm-hmm.
Valerian tea
Mm-hmm.
that I use for the sleep because at night I have trouble. Is a limit to consume the amount.
So the question is valerian root tea for sleep, is there a limit to consume? I think there is a limit to how much to consume. I don't know it off the top of my head, but I do know that it does interact with a few different medications as well. So that could be something to check if that's your nighttime routine, to take valerian root tea. Yeah, make sure that there's no drug nutrient interactions, based on your medications that you're currently using. So today I wanted to make a London fog tea. So I'll go ahead and demo this. Maybe quick show of hands. I have lactose-free milk and soy milk. Who would want lactose-free milk? Anybody? No. Soy milk. Anybody else? No? No? Okay. Milk. Okay. So I'll heat up some of both milks. And so what we're going to do today is a tea latte, basically. And so this is made, we're making a latte, so we want a concentrate amount of black tea. So I did half a cup of black tea, and we're just going to let it sit here and brew and get kind of strong. We want it stronger because we're going to add milk to it, right? And so we need about half a cup of milk, half a cup of water, so it's even. And then we're going to add a little bit of vanilla to the milk, and then you can see as you like. And so basically I'm just going to heat up a little bit of milk here, and I brought a frother. Help it froth up and get nice and frothy for us. You could also take a whisk and whisk really hard and get it frothy that way, or if you have a milk froth, sometimes it's nice to just have something special. That's what we're going to make today. But while I'm getting this ready, we could open it up to the chat. Oh.
So for those online, if there's any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. So the first comment, you're talking about the temperature of teas and weak to hot. My tea kettle has temperature setting. Fire loose tea or tea bag?
Oh, I mean, I don't think I can recommend anything that's been expired. There is often a difference between the best buy date and the expired date. The best buy date is when the manufacturer stands by their product and says their product is still good. It doesn't usually have anything to do with food safety. So that's something to consider there. So sometimes with something like tea, where we're not concerned about foodborne illness from this, if you wanted it past the best buy date, I think that would be okay. Did you find a date on there?
Yeah, it's best before, so it's not expired. This one is 2028.
Okay, yeah, this one's July 2028 as well.
Question would be like, what are signs that a loose or tea bag has gone bad? Like, is there?
I would defer to the best buy date, but anything that smells bad, looks moldy, appears to have gone bad, I would suggest avoiding. When in doubt, throw it out.
Next question. I like to brew herbs and then use that for making my tea. So I know, do you have seen issues? I know you want to go to herbal teas, but just.
I think it really just depends on what they are and how much, whether it's a concentrate. That's a good question to talk about with your team if you're concerned about it. Typically with our, mint leaves and things like that, I wouldn't have a real concern with you brewing mint leaves and adding them, but kind of just depends on what it is. But I will say that I am not an herbalist, so I hesitate to get too far into that.
Talk about like artificial and alternative. So does monk fruit sweetener also disrupt microbiome in the colon?
So monk fruit is interesting because it was actually left out of this World Health Organization analysis because I went and looked at it. I was like, okay, so which ones are we talking about here? And so they did not include monk fruit, although a lot of our monk fruit products do have erythritol or other sugar alcohols added to them. And part of it's because monk fruit is so extremely sweet, you only need like a tiny bit of it. And so that's a concern. If you're using a monk fruit sweetener that you're adding to food, one, does it have erythritol or other sugar alcohols added to it? And it's not just monk fruit, it's erythritol and monk fruit. And then two, how often are you using it? But again, it's hard to say to clearly avoid monk fruit because I haven't seen studies that specifically show harm or adverse effects from using it.
Thank you. If there's any other questions for those online, please feel free to put them into the chat as Megan here is preparing our delicious London fog lattes. And then Megan, did you want to talk about the 2 pamphlets? Sure.
Yes, I'd be happy to. So I brought some written education materials for anyone that's interested. This is something we have in our clinic, but I wanted to share it with y'all as well. This is from the American Institute for Cancer Research. They're our lead oncology nutrition organization in the country, and they have a lot of they have a very robust website with tons of information, but they put together these booklets. This one is focused on nutrition in the cancer survivor, and it just talks about diet, physical activity, food safety, how to evaluate nutrition information, sugar, supplements. Some of our most common questions are addressed here. And then I brought this as well. They put this together a while ago, but this talks about cancer fighters in your food and different antioxidants in our diet. Again, we're typically so focused on vitamins and minerals, but this really gets into the different compounds like the flavonoids and the carotenoids, lignans, tannins, let's see, phytosterols, and other bioactive compounds in the diet. So which foods we get them from, what the compounds are, what the potential protective actions are. And again, a lot of this is self studies because it is difficult to research, but I think it's still good information and really makes the case for having a plant-based diet and eating a diet that's rich in fruits, vegetables, beans, seeds, herbs, and other plant-based foods.
Wonderful. For those online, I did add those 2 documents digitally into the chat. If you would like the physical brochures that Megan did, email me and I can save them. But I thought they'll be here in our wellness room for everybody. I think we're good on questions. I want to thank Megan for her time and for doing all this research into tea. You think it's a pretty simple subject, but not really. So we do appreciate your time and expertise on this.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And if y'all have specific topics you want to hear about in the future, do let Rebecca know so she can help coordinate a future talk.